Hi everyone, my name is Selena and I'm a Teen Council member at the Contemporary Arts Museum Houston. Thank you so much for joining us for Teen Council Presents Artivism. Tonight I am joined by my teammate Matilda to moderate tonight's interview. Teen Council is a team of 13 high school students from a wide range of backgrounds and schools who collaborate, promote, and create public programming for their peers interested in contemporary art. Biannually, Teen Council hosts a citywide open call for artwork from Houston-based artists ages 13 to 19. We encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter and follow us on social media, as we will soon be announcing the details of how to submit to Teen Council's 12th biannual exhibition. We will also be sharing the theme of this year's exhibition, inspired by a series of questions.
CAM's doors are still closed, but we are working hard towards our reopening. We have a full program scheduled, so we encourage you to keep an eye on our website, calendar, newsletter, Instagram, and social media. Also check out a new initiative called Beyond CAM, which is an ongoing series of projects and partnerships beyond our walls.
First projects of this initiative was the work Accounting by Keen Ijeoma. This work is a voice portrait of Houston, thinking about the census, but also representation, marginalization, immigration, migration, and who is counted. This work invites everyone to participate and is perfect for these socially distanced times. And we would encourage anyone to call on the number and count from 1 to 100 in your native language. It doesn't matter if your language is already a part of the project. We still want your voice and accent to be counted. It doesn't matter if you don't live in Houston, that's okay. You can still participate by transcribing some of the voices and have them recorded so they can be a part of the project.
We hugely appreciate your participation in this program, which we are able to host through generous donations from folks just like you. I'd encourage all of you to consider a donation to CAM, which you can do today by texting GIVE to 713-804-4714. It's GIVE to 713-804-4714, and I think that'll be in the chat. Or by going to our website, which will also be linked in the chat.
Tonight, we're hosting a conversation with two artists from different generations to talk about their work, process, and how activism and social justice are part of their artistic process. Now, let me start by introducing Amira Dia. Amira Dia is a senior visual artist at Kinter High School for the Performing and Visual Arts. Dia is motivated by her African heritage and how it contrasts with her American surroundings. She focuses on historical and autobiographical stories and the metamorphosis of Black culture and Black characterization. Through depictions of the gray serpent, climbing silhouettes, milk alluding to topics of conformity, religion, and growth, incorporating patterns, fabrics, paintings, and sculpture that contribute to her overall themes, Dia also incorporates messages mainly regarding how slavery and the migration of Black people have changed us as a whole, and how her experience of the switch of her surrounding culture, both moving between Senegal and America while not having a space of belonging between the two. All of her work is created with the hope for Black unity and for generations to come.
Also joining us today is Annie Silverstein. Annie Silverstein is a filmmaker and educator based in Austin. Before attending film school, Annie spent 10 years as a youth worker collaborating on community film-based projects with Native American teenagers on reservations across Washington state. She co-founded and served as artistic director at Longhouse Media, a nonprofit indigenous film organization based in Seattle. After earning her MFA in film production from the University of Texas, Annie's short film, Skunk, won the jury award at the 2014 Cannes Film Festival, Cinéfondation. Annie was named on one of the 25 new faces of independent film by Filmmaker Magazine and was selected for the Sundance Screenwriters and Directors Labs for Bull. Her feature debut, Bull, premiered at the 2019 Cannes Film Festival, Uncertain Regard.
Thank you both so much for joining our fall program, Artivism. Let's begin by asking, tell us a little bit about yourself and your artwork.
Amira, you're I think you're spotlit. Are we, like, you look spotlit to me, so I think that means you got the mic.
Oh, I guess so. I guess I'm supposed to talk a bit about myself and my work. Nice. So I have some of my work behind me. My art bio really explains a lot about my work. It's really African-centered, and especially I'm now diving into a more social aspect of the social climate in America, especially for Black people. I overall have this goal of bringing in Black community throughout many generations and backgrounds and diasporas. I'm big on painting. Some more stuff about myself. I don't know. I'm at HSPVA and it's going good. So yeah.
Annie, tell us about yourself.
I live in Austin. I'm a filmmaker. My background, I was a youth worker first for many years after I got out of college. And actually it was through youth work that I kind of discovered my love of filmmaking, because I worked for a nonprofit and then ended up co-founding a nonprofit that used filmmaking as a tool of expression, and taught it to teenagers on reservations across Washington state as a way to tell stories, from the reservation, cultural preservation projects and things like that. And it was really through that youth work and community work that I fell in love with the craft of filmmaking myself. So then I applied to graduate school. This is how I got to Austin. I went to UT Austin for their film program, and I've stayed here since. I kind of went from documentary to fiction, although I do both now. And I'm a mom. That takes up the rest of my time.
Some great responses, some great introductions. Outside of art, what are your interests, and how do your interests influence your art?
So overall, I'm still a student, and I guess my interests just keep growing from now on. I've always been really active within social justice things, since I was in freshman year, and I still try to stay active. And recently I'm really impacted by my culture. But for things outside of art, I guess I like to say I like to read, just an everyday teenager. But I will say one of my biggest impacts within my life that also go within my art is when I'm able to visit my dad's side of the family in Senegal and get to go into that culture and really put myself within those environments and learn so much from it.
I guess prior to having a child, I had a lot of things that I'd like to spend my time doing outside of filmmaking. To be honest with you, filmmaking, it takes so much work because until you reach the point where you're actually supporting yourself off the films you make, most people are, working other jobs and then also still staying up late at night writing the scripts. These film projects take a tremendous amount of time. Bold took me 5 years to make, right? From the idea to it premiering. And so between that and also being a mom, I don't really have time. I spend all my, as soon as my daughter's asleep, I then, start writing at night. So I used to be into camping and music, and, I love reading too. And now, I just feel really fortunate to be able to still be able to make art and tell stories and also have a family.
Yeah, that's really nice. So our next question is, how does your artwork reflect your identity and age? When did you start making artwork, and when did you first consider yourself an artist?
So when it comes to artwork and my age, I still feel like I'm still too young and a bit inexperienced to really fully call myself an artist. Although I have good quality, I make good work, but there's so much more for me to learn with an artist. I still feel too naive and young, and I need to build more connections to really claim myself as one, because it's so easy to call yourself an artist, but there's a lot more that goes into it. I did start off since I was 3 years old, just drawing on a bunch of copy paper. I used to get my mom so mad because I would waste all their printer paper just making silly little doodles. And I feel like it did pay off, because now it's becoming one of my big career choices, something I can't live without. So yeah, my identity, well, it did really start off with me drawing myself, and it always started as self-portraits of what I wanted to be, but now it's me just speaking of how I am right now, how that could help with the world and how I could help people relate and understand certain things.
Yeah, I think a lot of teenagers go through that when they're trying to define themselves as an artist. Annie, what is your take on this? You have more experience as an artist and film director. So how do you think your artwork reflects your identity and age?
I might be older, but honestly, I feel like my response is somewhat similar in the sense of I feel like we're all just on our kind of personal trajectory as far as identifying ourselves as artists, or in my case, a filmmaker, and like my identity and age, I don't know. I feel like I need somebody else to tell me that. I know that my life experience is my greatest influence as far as what I write about. It's where I've spent time in my life. And it's like what inspires me to write. And it's the parts of America that I've experienced that I want to talk about, right? And so that's really what informs my art. And as far as calling myself a filmmaker, I've been making films, doc films, experimental films, narrative films for many years, but it really wasn't until, like the past 4 years or something that I felt really confident saying I'm a director, right? And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's, I think that like when you're in school or, making stuff in school, it can be hard to kind of come out with that. In a way, I feel like I should have come out sooner, but I also feel like I said before, like whether or not I call myself a director or whatever, I'm always going to be making something, right? And so it doesn't even really matter to me what I'm called or what I call myself or whatever. All that matters to me is if I'm making work, and that's my way of relating to the world. And it's like what gives me juice in life. And so that's how I boil it down.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists, both teen and more established, like you, Annie, can really relate to that. Just kind of being able to do a little bit of work every now and then. It really like, oh yeah, like I still do this. This is still like a day-to-day thing that I can do, which I know that changes for a lot of people. So what drew y'all to art and your choice in medium? I know we already kind of answered this, but if you have a more specific, go for it.
When I try to think of what drew me to it, I mean, there are some specific examples that were pretty recent, like even last year when Solange dropped her new album, and it was really Houston orientated. I remember I looked at her music videos and I got really inspired to where I just liked this Afrofuture way of portrayal. And I really went into it. And I have like a few artists that I really look up to, like Kehinde Wiley or or like Yinka Shoniver. But overall, just speaking about, especially with what is going on in the world, I've really been putting that into my work and trying to put it into more specific stories, but also stories that kind of relate to what I'm going through. So it's not as much of an ignorant story. But when it came to like art, I will say going to HSPVA has really amped up my passion for it and made me like more hungry to continue to be the artist that I want to be, with being in such a rigorous environment with around many other talented people. It's still a journey that I'm going through with building myself and falling more in love with art, but yeah.
I was listening to Amira and I don't now remember the question.
Yeah, it was a wonderful response. That was so well said. So the question was, what drew you to art and your choice in medium? Because I know with Amira, she was talking kind of about how she's always kind of had this like draw to it, to make printer paper with her mom, which I can totally relate to. And Annie, you said that your passion for art was kind of after you graduated to school. If you want to expand more on that.
Well, I guess like looking back now, I feel like I wasn't somebody that, like, as a kid, I was like, oh, I want to be a filmmaker. I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. Where like, I feel like a lot of the people that I went to graduate school and studied film with did have that experience. I was always making stuff, you know, like painting, paper mache, like whatever. I was always like wanting to build things, you know? And then in high school, I started writing music. I started writing songs, and I was in a band for many years. And that was kind of my big passion through high school and college even, was writing, and it was storytelling through that. And then again, it was really just through this work that I started doing with youth that I taught myself like super basic filmmaking, but it was because I was so passionate about the young people I was working with, and that collaboration, and the community, and you know, the social justice issues too that we were talking about. It was really through that I discovered filmmaking, and so I love filmmaking. I love directing. I love writing. I love so many aspects of it. If like somebody took it all away from me tomorrow, for some reason, if there was like a button and I could never do it again, I would find another way. I would find another medium. Do you know what I mean? Because I just, that's just, I've always found a medium to express and investigate life. And for me, that's what it is. I love filmmaking, and it stuck with me because I just feel like there's so much to explore with it. And you know, what I try to do with my work is explore the human experience, and that can take many forms, but that's what really feeds me.
That's such a beautiful response, Annie. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, as an artist myself, I think that is like we will always find a way to create. So this is a very broad question, but I think it really informs the artistic process. So what inspires you to create?
When it comes to having to create, recently it's just been like for school projects. But when I try to think about what if there's no school, like not the motivation of grades, like what will make me like get up and make work? And usually it's just this overall passion that I have for it. Like, I know that sounds kind of corny, but like I do, like it's a big driving point, just wanting to get up and create something overall. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes with the process of making something. It's kind of like, you know how people like running marathons? Like my way of running a marathon is by creating a large piece that I know will be rigorous with work, but in the end it will all be worth it. And just being able to like express myself, especially when I get more personal with deep thoughts in my brain, I feel better from just painting it out instead of talking about it in therapy. But yeah, those are like some main drives of just being able to get up and make something.
I always get so like lost in your answers because I'm like, oh, that's really, yeah, I totally feel that. What inspires me to make art? That was the question. Okay. I mean, people do. Simply, I like making film. I'll just talk about filmmaking. Making films is like an amazing way to meet people. And it's a great excuse, you know, as a documentary is my background, right? It's a wonderful way to explore the world and different cultures and people and life experiences that are not my own. And I love that. And I love meeting people who come from a different background. And I love collaborating in that experience of learning about a world that I didn't know anything about, you know? And really what I've done in fiction is, you know, my fiction is really influenced by my documentary background. And so similarly, I usually base films or scripts I'm writing in real communities that I've come to know, or based on real people that I've come to know that inspire me, or that like in some way I probably see myself in some way. And so it's just as much about kind of falling in love with all these different people I meet and their stories and perspectives, as well as, you know, as you said, therapy. Instead of therapy, it's like working through stuff from my own life through art, you know, and like, also like enough can't be said about like the unconscious and how much a part of art making that is, and how wonderful it is to just let your unconscious like roam and create stuff. And half the time I don't even know where things are coming from at first. And it's then when looking back, I can see, right? I can see how it relates to my life. I can see how it relates to like the world around me. That's like a wonderful thing to just have that freedom, right? And lastly, it's escapism. Like nothing like coronavirus and the year 2020 to like make me want to sit down and write a different reality, right? And go there and I don't know, I've never painted. I mean, Amira, I wonder if it's similar for you, but just like when you're in it, you're in a different world. It's like a trance. It's like you're somewhere else entirely. And it's just such a beautiful dimension to be in.
Yeah, it's very it's gravitating in a way, and it's like almost hypnotic when you get into the overall focus of your work, and it's hard to get out of it. And I mean, I will say, Annie, Miss Silverstein, I really would like to get into film somehow, because I do admire the whole process of writing and creating something in that visual motion aspect instead of in a picture way. And yeah.
I just have a quick follow-up question for Annie. So I know that for some of your films, like for Bull specifically, I remember that you had some of your actors who were not like professionally trained actors. Do you have like a specific reason for that, or was it just kind of like how it went?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it relates back to the work I was doing as a youth worker, as a community worker, and kind of as a doc worker, and lots of times in the collaborations with the teenagers that I was doing, we would make documentaries, right? But sometimes we would actually fictionalize things from their lives that they were going through that were too difficult to speak about openly. And that was my introduction into fiction, was working with real people, like talking about, like addressing real issues from their lives, but fictionalizing it. So not necessarily playing themselves, maybe playing someone in their family. And I was really inspired by that. So then when I got to film school and I started writing fiction, I always was interested in grounding it too in a real place, and in working with people from the community, you know, who could both bring their life experience to the film and bring their own language in some cases, you know. And so there was much more of a collaboration than me being like, okay, I've written every line and every detail, and like memorize this, show up, and I'll call action, you know. So it's just kind of a blend of my past experiences is how I approach fiction, and I love that approach.
And Amira, just a quick question for you based on Annie's answer. Do you I feel like you've already kind of answered it, but my original question was, do you often feel like you root a lot of reality in your work? I mean, you talk about immigrating to the US from Senegal, and you talk about your family a lot. Do you feel like there's a lot of like life experiences that you root specifically in your work that make you feel like it makes it feel like it gives it another dimension?
Definitely. A lot of the time I try to put it, like, I do think of something that is going on that's really impactful to me for the least, and then I try to fictionalize it in a way. Like right now I'm making a sort of book that goes into the whole motherly daughter relationship that goes to with Africans and African Americans and that whole separation. And it's kind of like, it reflects to how what I'm going through with my family, but also relating it in a more worldly historical aspect and putting it into a more fictional story. But also it just relates in different ways to even myself in the world. But yeah, I do think of that stuff a lot, just in any way.
So the next question that we have, how do you start? Okay, sorry, I was muted for a second. It was, how do you start creating? There's, I think the reason why we asked this is that there's a lot of people who feel like they have something to say or they have an idea that they want to express, and it's just kind of like, how do I get it onto paper, onto film, or just out in general? I know it's like a big question.
No, it's a really good. I was wondering if I had to go or if Miss Annie Silverstein went, but I guess it's really hard for me right now since I'm just in a school system and they're like, you have a due date, go do it. But really, and then you have to like really come up with something. But usually, I think my stories and whole plan just comes within this improv way. Like I come up with an image first. And I'm like, okay, create this image, but see how you can make it connect. But also like, I think of the meaning and the image, put it in, but then I start adding on to what the meaning is and little symbols that I like to put within my work, like little motifs, I would add them like throughout, like, oh, this would fit within this piece. Or maybe I should add a little more of this, you know? It's really a whole free play. There's really no structure to creating in my perspective. And it's really chaotic. It could be stressful, but it's sort of a blissful chaos. Like, even if you see my room, which is my workspace, after doing an improv type work, it's kind of scary, but you know, it's worth it.
I think, you know, when I'm asked like advice for emerging artists, or I mean, normally I'm just asked about filmmakers. It's hard for me to speak to all artists, but it's like my advice is like is in finding your voice, is to write, start from your life experience and what you know. I think a lot of people start from imitating what they've seen in films or TV. And that's tricky because it already exists and there's nothing really fresh about it. And when what's fresh is what you personally have to add to it. What is your spin? What is your life experience, right? That makes it unique. And so, so in my work, you know, when I started working on fiction, again, it was like I had spent 10 years as a youth worker at that point. And so I started and predominantly working with teenagers in a rural environment, and then I moved to Texas. And so even though I wasn't writing about the exact same group of young people I'd just been working with, I was still interested about thinking about teenagers and coming of age in a rural environment. And so, you know, several of the short films I made before Bull are from, you know, adolescents' perspectives. And then Bull, you know, again, it's a mix of writing about an adolescent who's been separated from her mom because her mom's incarcerated, which is something I was always interested in because I worked with teenagers whose parents were incarcerated. And then I moved to Texas, which has like the highest rate of female incarceration in the country. And it's like a staggering rate. Our mothers, I think it's like 60 or 70% or something, incarcerated females. So it was like something I was always interested in. But again, I didn't like set off. I never like start with a message. I start with people and psychology and kind of what our internal journeys are. And so I felt very close to this teenager. And then again, with a doc background, through living in Texas, when I was location scouting for another film, I met a man who shared his family history with me, and he came from a Black rodeo family. And I didn't know about the history of Black cowboys, you know, and it was like eye-opening to me. And I became really interested in learning more about it, like how you know, how cowboys are represented, like the John Waynes that I grew up seeing. This was like this whole other part of American history, of course, that was very whitewashed. and again, it wasn't so much that I was like starting with a political message. It was like, I'm sorry, I was about to cuss and I was like, I shouldn't do that. But it was like, whoa, this is like this whole part of this world I want to know more, right? And so for me, it's like, I want to know more. And if I want to know more, because again, it can take so long, it can take 2 years, it can take 5 years. You don't want to start a project unless you want to spend a lot of time in it, you know, as a filmmaker. And so I wanted to know more and learn more and spend time in the community. And so that's where all my ideas generate, is just, you know, where do I want to spend my time? It takes so much of your life. It takes so much time, so much sacrifice in film. So where do you want to spend your time? And then who inspires you and how do you relate to it? It's a very long answer, but.
No, it was great. Transitions perfectly into what we were about to talk about next. So part of this interview is a little bit about social justice, which is not, we understand it's not like the focus of y'all's work, but we do believe that your work has bits and messages of social justice that's kind of relevant to the current climate. Is there, whenever you express social justice through your work, is there a certain way that you go about it, or do you just kind of, you're just kind of like, if it happens, it happens, sort of thing?
So when it comes to speaking about something that I have really like great passion about, usually being Black issues within it, that's my whole statement. I've been focusing on becoming a little more controversial in what I say and talking about the more sexual harassment part that happens to Black women within, like, from the beginning to now, and how it feeds into certain fetishizations, and even speaking about the criminalization of just Black culture and the overall like conformity. I've started painting them in a more grody way, to where it comes off as more discomforting to the viewer. I do aim for like more discomfort when it comes to something that's really passionate about issues, so they could sort of be put into the shoes of discomfort when they're as the victims, being Black people, so more people could like understand the sort of discomfort and disdain that happens within the community. But also sometimes within my social justice, I like to do a lot of uplifting by showing the beauty within it, showing our potential, and just overall like trying to lift the spirits even of young Black kids, because I feel like around my childhood sometimes I feel like I've missed that opportunity to feel that much pride, and like only until a couple of years before I've actually became proud of my Blackness and myself. And I want to be able to give that to other Black kids my age that grow up in predominantly white communities. I'm sorry, this is going on for a long time. But overall, I do like to show the discomfort, but also uplift. Yes.
Beautiful. What was it? That was beautiful, Amira.
That was so awesome. I think Selena's about to cry. Oh geez, I can't even remember what the actual question I asked. I
think it was about social justice in our work, like how we think of it.
Yeah, like how you express it, how you think of it. Because I know, Annie, your social justice in some of your work might be a bit different than Amira's, because you worked with different communities and you've had a bit of a different life experience than Amira did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like feels easier to, like, I come from documentary, and so like the first feature documentary I made was in collaboration with 3 teenagers from the Swinomish tribe in Washington, exploring 2 oil refineries that were put on their reservation on land that should belong to the tribe. Still, it's like they were legally put there, and the effect that it's had on their reservation, on their community, on, you know, this was like historically a fishing community, on the fish that they consume so much, you know, And so as a documentary filmmaker, it was more kind of issue based, I suppose, in my approach. In fiction, I feel like, but I would say issue based, but also still very like personal, you know, because I'm always interested in how those connect and the personal stories. But in fiction, I feel like, you know, my fiction work, you know, definitely has like a political and social dimension, but again, it's not something that I start off and I say, okay, or so far I haven't, like, I'm going to write about this issue and I'm going to explore it through this character. It's more that that happens in an unconscious way, I would say, in part. But also it just happens, you know, because I think the approach that I was talking about before, like the place that, like, I'm really interested in telling stories from perspectives that aren't necessarily like shown in mainstream media. And I'm interested in using an approach that's about collaboration. And so through that approach of working with a lot of non-actors who come from the community and are able to bring their history and their culture and language and everything to the piece, I think naturally, you know, this dimension of the stories addressing social and political issues comes up, right? These are like human stories, so it comes up. But again, I haven't yet written, I haven't like started with a message in my writing, in my fiction writing, where I'm like, this is what I want to say. It's just not how I create, I guess.
Yeah, that was a really, like, the duality of y'all's answers was really interesting. Just kind of like the different ways y'all create based on your medium and just kind of the experiences that you've had.
On your screen.
Let me see the next written question that we have. So have you guys, both of you have different communities that you've worked with or have experienced. Have you seen an impact from your work at all? And Annie, I think yours might be, because like you worked with Native American teens. Was there like a direct impact or anything? Was anything changed, or was there like any kind of realization within the communities that you were able to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that one documentary I talked about definitely had a life after we made it. It played on PBS Independent Lens, and we kind of toured with it a lot too. And the young men that I worked with were the spokespeople for the film. You know, it was their story, and the film ended up being just as much about them becoming storytellers as it was about the oil refineries. And so it had a tremendous impact on them, for starters, you know, just growing into that role. And then of course it had an impact, you know, with the tribe having this film that explores this, you know, really problematic issue that's a part of their community, which is these refineries. And we got a ton of feedback on it, you know, so it was like, it felt very impactful. And I think that for my other films, you know, especially for fiction, I think that the way that I feel the impact the greatest is from the people that I work with on it. So again, you know, what it meant to the Black cowboy community in Houston who helped us bring this film to life. Like, we couldn't have made it without them. What it meant to them to be a part of this collaboration and to see themselves on screen and to see this arena that they've grown up bullfighting in every weekend shown, you know, and to have this kind of big audience for it was really powerful. And so that's the feedback that sticks with me the most.
Do I answer?
Yeah, have you answered?
Oh, no. Well, I haven't, my art hasn't really been out there as much, but the most impact that I could think of is probably within fellow students that have also had impact with me too. I mean, sometimes I would hear after critique about how they enjoy my piece and how it could be helpful, you know, for communities. And I do remember there was times that I did speak at my school's panel about talking about how we could help Black students within our school and the art department feel more open and comfortable, especially with expressing themselves within art or just as themselves. But definitely, I will say it hasn't really gotten out there because, you know, I'm still a student, but hopefully I hope I'm able to like make some change and definitely bring some unity within, you know, the whole Black diaspora. Like that's one of my biggest goals.
Yeah, that's definitely very beautiful, Amira. I definitely have been touched by your work. I want to ask you, in a lot of current events, what is the way you would prompt the audience for civic engagement? Like, what would you want to do in the future?
When it comes to think about how to like first I feel like I need to get an audience really when it comes to in light of these events and how to like trigger real attention from it. Art can be a good way to get that attention, but I also, one of the reasons I want to get into film is because it's a good viewer experience of seeing things in motion, whether it's animated or live action. But I would like to be able to open up communities for even just one of my biggest things is just like something that I struggled with in my childhood or just growing up is definitely, it's like being able to balance my Black cultures, you know, being African and then African American, and then trying to see how I could just make that all work out with my whole, you know, weird type of personality that I like to just make it. I want to maybe create a community or maybe just a place, an environment for just artists of color, just like anyone basically, to just come in and feel open to being themselves despite how they look, especially for, you know, Black kids who feel like they have to fit in within the stereotype, to know that they could do, you know, whatever they want, express how they want, even within music, visual arts, or how they dance, you know. And that's one of my biggest ways of unification that I want to fight for.
Yeah, I would say, you know, starting conversations and also just creating, you know, human connection as far as people being able to watch a film or a story from someone who's really different from them perspective. You know, I think that goes a very, very long way. And I think that can create empathy, which we need a lot more of. And that's how I see the kind of work that I'm doing, you know, serving, what was the question? Civic engagement, or, you know, trying to get people engaged and thinking about it. And hopefully, you know, art has the potential to do that to the point where it's not just a conversation, but it's also taking action, you know. And, you know, I think like, I don't know what if I think it's our like responsibility as an artist to do that work. I think it's our responsibility as human beings, you know, and we happen to be artists too. But I think it's our responsibility as human beings to, whether through art or just through conversation, you know, make our communities better, fight inequality, right? Like, and try to create empathy. And so, yeah, I guess we are able to do that through our work. And I know we are doing that through our work in different ways. But sometimes I'm also like ready to put filmmaking aside and just like be like, we didn't just have a conversation. As a human being, I need to get in the streets and do that, right? So Yeah, it's been a very long week and a very long year. So I'm still kind of, it's a good question, and I'm still processing a lot what happened this week, and with a lot of relief too, but also how polarized America is, and all that.
Yeah.
I'll stop myself there before I take this conversation into a different direction.
You're good.
I mean, that honesty about creating, like, being as humans, we have to, stand up for what's right. I think that's like very insightful and enlightening. So we want to open up the audience for questions. So if you have any questions, please just submit them into the Q&A. So we have one here from Isaac Vermont. And so how do you think the art world of Houston or other cities you worked in has affected your art practice?
Can you repeat that question? How do I think that?
Yeah, how do you think the art world of Houston has affected your art practice or other cities you've worked in?
All I have is Houston, but I will say I have been really looking into a lot of local Houston artists, and I do really admire how prominent we are in this art world, even just from like being in Texas, which is a little unexpected when you think about it, like Texas having a great art capital being Houston. I will say I feel like there's a lack of representation of Black artists in Houston, although it's starting to come out a little bit more only now. I do wish it was more like that before, but I will say one of my biggest inspirations within my work within Houston is John T. Biggers or something, in his work in Texas State University, in TSU. I see one of his murals, and it's truly like really hypnotizing, and it really inspired me in his way of composition and storytelling. And even just looking at art around TSU, it's truly inspiring. And I love especially the community around like Third Ward and stuff. And you can find some really hidden gems around that area.
Yeah, I can really just speak to, what it was like making a film in Houston. The amazing resource that Houston Film Commission is to filmmakers, how supportive they were, and Alfred Cervantes, and also the community that we, again, worked with to bring it to life. The Black cowboy community, and then the neighborhood of Acres Homes, where we predominantly shot most of the film there. All of it, like the Houston Film Commission and the community, everybody was so just excited and passionate and wanting to collaborate, and it's what made the film possible. Like, this is definitely a film we would not have been able to make without everyone's involvement in that collaboration and the support that we had. So my feelings about Houston, I'm based in Austin. I'm originally from Oakland, California. But I love Houston. I think it's such a fascinating place, and it's such a great place to generate work and meet people and work together.
So this is a question from Maddie. How do you both deal with artist block?
That's a really hard question, because sometimes artist block does get the best of me, and I do stray off from my level. But usually when it comes to art block, I usually get a lot of inspiration from fellow students in my school, and I feel like that's another way for like even artists outside or filmmakers to get their inspiration from, just looking at peers. And I feel like that's one of the benefits of being in a community around other people like me who make art and are passionate about it, and being able to just see what they're doing that has just the same amount of passion as you, and being like, okay, this is like, and admire it, and also take in some of what they're doing, but putting it into your own twist. But dealing with artist block, it's really hard. It's just like, do I sleep on it? Do I just try to sketch out some things? It all depends. But best way to get it is just from looking at the people around you and your peers.
I mean, I deal with it in writing, but I really try not to be too precious. Like, I try to give myself permission to write something that really sucks, you know, especially like a first draft of a feature. Lots of times I think people can't get through it because you're writing, and then at some point you stop and you read what you've written, and if you're like, wow, that's okay, but this part sucks, then you like don't finish for like years. Like, and I just don't really allow myself not to finish. I just like take the mindset of like, it's gonna suck, and then I'm gonna have a lot of time to work on it and make it better and like figure out the heart and soul of it and the good little gem in there, and then throw away all the crap, you know? And so that for me is really liberating, and that helps a lot with feeling blocked, because I've given myself permission to just like get over it, right? And know that I'll come back to it. I think like at times when I felt really blocked in the edit or with other things, like Amira said, you know, it's about getting inspiration from other people. And for me, like I have a very small group of people that I really trust their opinion, and their friends. One of them is my husband, or their collaborators. And, you know, they're not people that are going to like say like, it's great if it's not great. They're going to be like real. They're going to tell me. And then, so I trust them, right? I wouldn't want to just show it to friends who like are being polite and are like, it's great. I think it works. Like, and so having that crew of people, like, and not too many voices, but just like a small crew that you really, really trust, and that also knows the kind of artist you are, or like the kind of storyteller and what it is you're trying to do, not what they would do, but what you are trying to do, like getting feedback from that crew. And that's something that like I think for me has been something I've kind of formed that crew over time. You have to like find your people, you know, but then you find your people and you never let them go.
We've got questions just piling in. So from Sheila Benavides, what artists, exhibitions, films, televisions, or books have provided you with inspiration, or do you think we should know about? So what like media has provided you with inspiration, and should everyone like, have you ever like read a book or watched something and you're like, everyone should read and or watch this?
To be honest, I have a few. Right next to me is this book by a Haitian author called Brother, I'm Dying by Edwige Ndicat. And it's a very beautiful, intimate story that talks about sort of the struggles of immigration, but in a context of Haitians. But it also like goes past like borders of, you know, immigration problems of cultures, and also just the wash away of culture, but also trying to stand strong in it. And it also has just this beautiful family message that goes with it that I sometimes do take into consideration with my art. And it's heartbreaking, but also beautiful story.
Sorry, my daughter's hand just came under the door. I don't. That's my short answer, because this is the thing, is like, I didn't grow up like a cinephile, you know, and I don't feel, it's also like most of the films I grew up watching were like written and directed by white men, you know, and so it's not that there aren't great films and classic films that I'm like, sure, everybody should watch that, but I'm like, I just don't really believe in lists, or like for me, even like if I say, oh, for me this film was very influential or whatever, that it would be for you, right? I think part of what's exciting about film right now is that so many more people from different backgrounds are able to make films, right? That it's just becoming more diverse. And because of that, I think even structurally and how films are told is going to change and take different shape. And so I don't know. I just didn't, for me personally, you know, the thing that has always inspired me the most is life, is meeting people. And that's where I find my stories versus watching some old classics, or even like, you know, I don't know, the films that everyone who goes to film school watch, and then are like, okay, now I'm going to start writing now that I've studied these. You know, it's not how my experience has been. But that's not true of a lot of filmmakers.
Okay, we are going to take one more question, since we only have time for one more. This is from an anonymous attendee, and it's a little bit more relevant to just like current happenings. So how has social media affected your process and practice, and how has COVID-19 affected your art and or your process? Because there's a lot of people who have been saying like, oh, COVID-19 is going to put us into like a new renaissance, which for some artists, some of my peers have expressed like, no, like I've been unable to do anything. Have you guys had a similar experience or a more unique one?
I have had that sort of lack of motivation, especially with this uncertainty that we just all feel. And then now we have this anxiety with like elections and everything. And it's a really weird social climate that we're in, even with the protesting and that has been happening and still sort of is happening right now. It's hard when it's like a lot of pressure. Like we're in a time that is so historical, but also we're just feeling so much pressure as humans ourselves. It's a lot to even just get up and do it. So me personally, it's been hard for me to think of impactful work that has to do with COVID. Like it's been really hard.
Yeah, I don't get anything from social media. I mean, social media for me is like a drug that I do when I'm feeling disconnected and lonely, basically. It's not healthy for me. I'm a completely different generation, but that's when I engage with it. I don't know. I just started following Amira on Instagram. So I find that inspiring, you know, when I follow artists, photographers, you know, that I'm inspired by. That's great. Like I do use social media for that too. But wait, what was the other part? Oh, COVID? No, COVID, no. I mean, but the thing is like, I have this like fantasy that if I wasn't a mom, right, I'd be like, I would have written like 10 scripts by now, you know, and I'd be like so prolific and da 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 da. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of friends that aren't parents who have said they're blocked and it's too much time and they feel too isolated and all those things, you know. But there's just like no way because, you know, lack of childcare and all that kind of stuff is just made it even more crazy than it normally is. But, you know, I think in some way it's also the flip side is that I feel like I can't wait to get together with a group of people and make something again. And that's felt so kind of crystallized for me because making Bowl was very hard and it was very exhausting. And I think getting to the end of it, I was a little burned out, honestly, you know, and so having time when you're basically quarantined and by yourself again, you realize what a privilege it is to even have that opportunity to make stuff and to work together with people to bring something to life. And so I value that even more.
Yes, I think that honesty about like feeling that pressure to create is definitely something a lot of artists have been going through. And I think it's okay to not be able to. Thank you so much for joining our conversation. That was so enlightening. I feel like I've learned so much from both of you. You have like definitely opened up some of my eyes, but I have multiple eyes. But thank you for joining us. And for the attendees that came and watched our conversation between Amira Dia and Annie Silverstein, remember to check out the CAMH's calendar for more updates. Again, very soon, Teen Council will be hosting a citywide open call for our work to submit to Teen Council's 12th annual Houston Teen Artist Exhibition. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. This was
Thank
awesome.
you.